Thank you, Kimberly. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to present at this webinar. I'm very happy to share our experience and contribute to the discussion afterwards during the Q&A. So, as Kimberly mentioned, my name is Katia Laranjeira. I am the manager of PTCRIS. And let me tell you a little bit about PTCRIS. But before that, I'm just trying, okay. So before that, let me just tell you a little bit about FCT first. So FCT is the main funding agency supporting research and other scientific activities in Portugal. PTCRIS that I mentioned before is a program developed by FCT, which is the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. This is a publicly funded agency, and its vision is to establish Portugal as a global reference for research and innovation. To fulfill its vision, FCT supports through various funding instruments different types of activities, such as research projects, advanced training and scientific employment, institutions, research infrastructures, and also international collaborations and knowledge transfer. Within FCT, we have a unit called FCCN that provides to the academic and research community a number of digital services on 5 main areas represented here on the right. The knowledge area focuses on ensuring the community access to sources of scientific information of recognized prestige and quality, promoting, supporting, and facilitating open access to Portuguese scientific production, and also through the PTCRIS program to facilitate management and access to information on the national scientific activity. So PTCRIS, zooming in on this program, PTCRIS, it was launched in 2014 to meet this huge goal that we took up as our mantra, and this is register once, reuse always. So to meet this goal, it became very clear very soon that it would be critical to move from a scenario like this one represented here, where research information systems of the different entities that operate in this ecosystem do not communicate between each other, depending almost solely on the researchers to continuously update their information, to a scenario like this one in which research information just flows between the different systems. And to this integrated ecosystem, we called PTCRIS. Developing this ecosystem will allow us not only to alleviate the administrative burden that still lies on the researcher's shoulders by simplifying the research information management, but it will also promote the generation and access to more reliable information on scientific activity, which in turn will improve our ability to both measure and discover such scientific activity much more efficiently. So these are the three big goals, the three main goals of PTCRIS: simplify information management and also to measure and discover this scientific activity much more efficiently. So to develop the PTCRIS ecosystem, we developed two main lines of action. The first one is to develop a regulatory framework and infrastructures based on the core entities of the research ecosystem. And these are, of course, researchers, organizations, outputs, projects, funding. And the second line of action is to promote adoption of this regulatory framework and infrastructures by the different systems to ensure interoperability, to ensure that the information will flow between them, so that we can then start to develop added value services such as a research portal, analytic tools to provide indicators, or tools to monitor open science. And that's exactly where we are now. But today, to showcase how ORCID is integrated in our workflows, I will focus mainly on the curricula management platform, CIENCIAVITAE. This is actually the first national system entirely based on the PTCRIS regulatory framework and infrastructures. It is embedded with the mantra register once, reuse always from its conception. And so this system and its development follows four major guiding principles. First and foremost, CIENCIAVITAE is researcher-centric, and this means that the researcher is the ultimate responsible for all the information registered in CIENCIAVITAE, be it manually or through automation mechanisms. He is always the responsible for the information registered. The second guiding principle that guides the development of PTCRIS, that it's at the heart of the development of CIENCIAVITAE, is privacy. So the researcher controls who has access to his information and which data he gives access to within the context of CIENCIAVITAE, very much like ORCID. Also, CIENCIAVITAE should establish itself as a single CV, meaning that it should occupy a central space in the academic and scientific ecosystem, functioning as a tool to carry out any administrative act based on a CV. And finally, it should also be interoperable. So it should be integrated with as many as possible national and international systems to allow for the reuse of information that has been previously registered by the researcher himself or others. This information should be reused when filling in the CIENCIAVITAE. And that's exactly what we work towards to. So we developed integrations with multiple systems, mostly national systems, and started building and making of CIENCIAVITAE a national hub. And just to give you a few examples, if we focus on outputs, we integrated CIENCIAVITAE with the Scientific Open Access Repositories of Portugal, RCAP, and also with the National Database for Theses and Dissertations. If we think on projects, we developed an integration with the National Registry of Funded Projects, CIPROJ, and many more integrations I could detail here. But for the sake of time, I'll just carry on and say that turning CIENCIAVITAE into a national hub contributed very much to support the researchers' needs for local interoperability. Streamlining, of course, data flow across various Portuguese institutions. However, this was not enough. And this is because obviously scientific research is global. And so these national integrations, while beneficial, were not sufficient by themselves. So to fully meet researchers' needs for international reach and recognition, we saw it was necessary to synchronize our national hub with ORCID's global infrastructure. And so, living up to the mantra register once, reuse always, we developed a synchronization framework, which we called PTCRIS Sync, that allows for the automatic exchange of metadata on both outputs and projects between the two platforms, so between CIENCIAVITAE and ORCID. This means that any new outputs or projects added to ORCID, for example, will automatically be updated in CIENCIAVITAE and vice versa, thus avoiding the repetitive work of inserting this information into the various systems manually. So since the launch of CIENCIAVITAE, all these integrations that were developed allowed for the importation of more than 31,000 records from CIPROJ, the National Registry of Funded Projects, around 327,000 open access scientific outputs have been imported from RCAP, almost 85,000 theses and dissertations have been imported from the national database called RENATS, and a very impressive 2.8 million of records have been synchronized with ORCID. So we estimate that more than 154,000 hours would be necessary to register this information manually on the CIENCIAVITAE platform and were otherwise saved through all these integrations. According to our calculations, this is the equivalent to more or less 24 million hours. So how does this work? Sorry, I'll skip one here. Before getting into the details, let me just first tell you that everyone involved in research activities in Portugal must adopt the Ciência ID system. We call it Ciência ID Plus system. This system establishes that every researcher should have a Ciência ID, which is the national PID, the national identifier for researchers, and also an ORCID. So Ciência ID is actually the only PID that is mandatory. It is a unique and long-lasting digital identifier that will allow for the recognition of those involved in research activities in Portugal. It is associated with the identity card, and so there is only one Ciência ID per person, and it not only provides a mechanism of identification, but it also provides a mechanism of authentication in a number of platforms used in the national scientific system. And this includes not only CIENCIAVITAE, the national curriculum management platform, but also the funding application platforms run by FCT, MyFCT, and the open access repositories of Portugal, to name a few. Now, anyone registering a Ciência ID is given the possibility to link the ORCID account to their Ciência ID. The ORCID is not mandatory in the PTCRIS ecosystem, but it is recommended and its adoption is actually promoted. So if a researcher is creating his account on this platform, he can opt to use his ORCID account. And in doing so, some of his personal details will actually be automatically filled in. And from that point onwards, the two accounts will be linked. So his Ciência ID will be linked with his ORCID ID. And obviously, this means that every time the researcher logs onto a system with the Ciência ID, his ORCID ID can also travel to this system. And that's what we can see here in this screenshot. So this is a screenshot of the CIENCIAVITAE platform. And here in the identification functional area, we can find the ORCID ID that as one of the author identifiers. And this is an example of the reuse of previously registered information. Because if you remember, this researcher registered his Ciência ID using his ORCID account, and in doing so, this information will then travel to CIENCIAVITAE once he logs in. But even if the researcher does not link his Ciência ID to the ORCID account, he can still introduce that information directly onto the CIENCIAVITAE platform. And to do that, he just has to click on this button, create and connect your ORCID ID. By doing that, he's redirected to the ORCID register webpage, and from that point onwards, his ORCID profile will be associated with his CV. Okay, so once there is a CIENCIAVITAE for this researcher, he can then start filling in and updating his curriculum. And to do that, he can use this import wizard that is nothing more than a collection of tools that can be used to import information from other systems, thereby accelerating the creation of the curriculum. So this is the product of all the integrations that I mentioned before. And of course, ORCID is one of the systems that he can choose to import from. So through the PTCRIS sync framework, the researcher can actually synchronize data by clicking on the button on the right, synchronize data. Or it can go directly to the outputs or the project's functional area. And here he finds an alert that informs him in this particular example that 96 outputs can be synchronized between the two platforms. So every time he logs into CIENCIAVITAE, if the two platforms are synchronized, then there is an alert that informs the researcher of an action that he can actually take to synchronize records that are synchronizable, and he hasn't done that yet. And that is very simple, so he just has to click on that button, synchronize, and then he finds a list of records that he can act upon. So the first record, for example, is an output that is actually, it has been identified in CIENCIAVITAE, but is still not on his ORCID profile. So he can choose to add it automatically to his ORCID profile just by selecting that box and click on synchronize. And you can also do the same for other records, like, for example, the two on the bottom. That is the other way around. So these are records that are in the ORCID profile, but not on CIENCIAVITAE. So you can just very simply ensure that both platforms are up to date. Also, in this page, he has access to this other tab, which is called Alerts. And here the user can actually understand the reason why some records are not being synchronized. So here he finds a collection of situations that prevent synchronization to occur. It can be more difficult things, but it can be simple things like a title that is missing or an identifier that is missing. And by providing this information, we actually give the user the possibility to act upon this record, perform the necessary changes so that the record becomes synchronizable. And finally, there is also a third tab where the researcher can find a list of all the records that are currently synchronized, and he can decide granularly at the record level to stop synchronization or not. So at this point, where are we? So virtually everyone actively developing scientific activities in Portugal have a CIENCIAVITAE. And this is very much because the platform is linked to funding applications to FCT, the main, as I said, the main public funding agency in Portugal. So this means that almost, I would say, very close to 100% of researchers will have to have their CIENCIAVITAE updated every time they need to apply for funding, for FCT funding. And the number of CVs that have been created up to now in the platform amounts to more than 107,000 curricula. Nearly 70% of these researchers have their ORCID ID associated with the CV, with CIENCIAVITAE. Researchers also linked other identifiers, other research identifiers, but this occurs at a much lower proportion in the curriculum, as you can see in this graph. Now, more interesting is the fact that the number of both outputs and projects synchronized between the two platforms have been consistently increasing, and between 2021 and the current year, 2024, we find a more than 50% increase in the number of both outputs and projects that have been synchronized between the two platforms. Also, if we focus on all the projects registered in CIENCIAVITAE, here in this pie chart on the right, we find that almost 50% are synchronized. And if we look at outputs on the pie chart on the left, we find that the numbers are even more impressive, with as much as 82% of the records synchronized between CIENCIAVITAE and ORCID. So here is just an example of one of such synchronized records. In this case, this is a funded project that this metadata has been aggregated and enriched in SciProj, the national funding projects database. And then it was imported by the researcher to CIENCIAVITAE and finally synchronized with ORCID. So the information just flows between all these systems. These and other records are actually the basis for the science indicator system we are developing that enables the analysis of the funding attributed to scientific activities in Portugal. So with this enriched metadata, such as ORCID research identifiers, organization identifiers, funding identifiers, and so on and so forth, we are actually enabling a comprehensive analysis of science funding in Portugal across various funders and funding instruments. So we hope that this will allow us to analyze funding trends over time, and that and also the evolution of funding across scientific domains, and eventually explore connections between institutions and individual researchers. So we believe that this will provide a strategic view of the science landscape, helping to ensure that resources are aligned with the national and global priorities when it comes to research. So I'm almost getting to the end of my talk here. I would just like to leave you with a few takeaway messages. So Portugal has adopted a strategy to streamline research information management, and this strategy materializes in this program that we called PTCRIS. Within the context of PTCRIS, we have developed CIENCIAVITAE as a national hub, and this national hub is in sync with the international hub, which is ORCID. In our ecosystem, ORCID is not mandatory, but its adoption is promoted. So while there isn't a mandate for ORCID adoption, there is actually a concerted effort to promote its adoption by maximizing its benefits through mechanisms that actually alleviate the bureaucratic burden on researchers. So that's what we hope for. And we think that this approach focusing on highlighting the advantages for researchers makes this process much smoother for everyone, and seeing the benefits as actually become the main point of our strategy. So allowing for a considerable reduction in the time spent registering information makes it very appealing, and we believe the right strategy to actually implement this program. And of course, ORCID is a key element in this ecosystem. So to finalize, I will just leave you here some numbers on the ORCID side, which we find very, very interesting. We found that through integration between CIENCIAVITAE and ORCID, more than 200,000 ORCID profiles have been updated with funding metadata. And also, this integration has contributed significantly to enrich ORCID registry, the ORCID profiles, with information on theses and dissertations. So we think that this numbers points to a strategy that is actually working for everyone involved, for all the stakeholders, with benefits for all the stakeholders. And with that, I finish. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know, Kimberly, if you're there.
So
I couldn't
Kimberly
hear you.
is unfortunately not here. because of an internet disruption that
Oh.
she had. But thank you very much, Katia, for the presentation. And then I will pick the questions. So we have here a question saying, congratulations on your presentation. It was very enlightening and brought me a question about the possibility of the Lattes curriculum in Brazil, also adopting open standards through PTCRIS such as ORCID. What are your thoughts on this? And I remember, Katia, we discussed this already. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, PITs are are a centerpiece in all these ecosystems. So it's central for interoperability, it's central for the fairness of data and metadata. So it's central for open science in general. We are advocates. We advocate the use of PIDs, but like us, many other countries and are having initiatives to make sure that PIDs are implemented. So obviously, PIDs are not a goal in themselves, but they are the pillars for all these integrations and these strategies that then can actually bring benefits for the researchers and for the research community. We are in close contact with Brazil, so we have a collaboration in place, working with the team that is developing the Lattes curriculum. So I know now that there are, if not yet, there will be some changes in the Lattes curriculum, and all the efforts are towards making it more interoperable, making it easier to register information, but also to leverage all the information that has been registered and all the efforts that the researchers make to have these curriculums updated, to then have other systems in place, like the ones that I described, the indicator system or research portals, so that researchers do not have to put in that information again, and all these efforts actually make sense and can be used for different purposes. So definitely a big advocate of PIDs.
Thank you very much, Katia. And yes, that's my understanding as well, that CV Lattes in Brazil is now working to use more PIDs and also have better what they call import assistance, so that they can reuse data, as you were mentioning, from other platforms. Great. So we have the chat open and we also have the Q&A. So don't be shy and add your questions there. If not, I have a general one for you, Katia, while our community is preparing their own. In the process of establishing PTCRIS, the framework, and also using those connections, have you encountered any problems or barriers, or maybe people that weren't in favor of that process?
Right. I wouldn't say, it's not so much, I think people in general, the community is very willing to uptake these concepts, and they understand very well the benefits that come up from implementing these kind of mechanisms. It's just that sometimes the main obstacle is the lack of resources. So what happens is, even though institutions as a whole understand the benefits that would come from implementing all these PIDs in their systems and having them interoperable using data models that are standards, control vocabularies, etc., The thing is, it's actually very difficult to implement them, and that makes it harder. So we have no problem in having our message across and having institutions and researchers understanding the benefits. It's more the fact that it takes a while to get there, and it takes some efforts to get there. Once it's implemented, everything works fine. And as our director usually says, no news is good news. So no one mentioned us, and that's very good. That means that everything is streamlined and everything works fine. But to get there, it takes a while and it takes some effort. Yeah.
Absolutely. I will pick that. No news is good news. We have another question here, says, thank you very much for the presentation. It is amazing to learn the integration between various systems and ORCID. May I ask if CIENCIAVITAE is linked to the National Grant Management System? For example, if a researcher applies for a grant, do they just provide the link of their CIENCIAVITAE page in the application form? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So it is linked. So the way we developed CIENCIAVITAE, coming back to the guiding principles, thinking that it should actually serve many purposes. One of the purposes would be, of course, to be used within the context of grants application, and it is. But it's also used in many other contexts, and I'll explain a little bit more on that. So, answering directly to your question, what happens is a researcher that is applying for a grant, let's say, will access the MyFCT platform. And at some point when there is a section for CV curriculum, and it just has to do upload, to click a button that says upload. So he gives permission first. He clicks a button to say, I give permission to FCT to fetch my CV from CIENCIAVITAE platform. And then he just uploads it, clicks a button, and the CV is uploaded. So that's how it works. Basically 2 clicks. To make sure that the CV is uploaded and associated with that application. So that's a use case for CIENCIAVITAE. It's a huge use case because it was actually the big driver to ensure that it was uptaken by the community massively. But we also work towards other use cases. So for example, it is heavily used by institutions to build websites, to build a directory of the researchers. It is used also by the National Innovation Agency to build also a directory of everyone involved in innovation in Portugal, but also to build within the context of an experts portal. It is used, for example, to synchronize information between the institutional CRIS systems, so the research information systems of the higher education higher education institutions with CIENCIAVITAE. So there are also examples of institutions that are doing that. Others use it as a source of information to build reports on their performance, the performance of their community. So there are a number of use cases, and we have at the moment around 60 entities using our APIs to actually materialize all these uses for the CIENCIAVITAE, all the information that is registered onto CIENCIAVITAE.
Great. That's super interesting, particularly the application part only with 2 clicks and then connecting the CIENCIAVITAE, the curriculum vitae to the corresponding application. And this definitely solves a lot of time, and people can focus on other things. Great.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know if we have more questions from our community. Nothing coming to the chat or the Q&A. Give a couple of minutes. Kimberly is luckily back, I think, which is great. Hi back, Kimberly.
Yes, thank you, Paloma, for helping out there. And sorry, I missed the rest of the presentation. While we give everyone a few minutes to consider any last minute questions they have, I do want to share a link. If your organization has an ORCID integration that you would like to be considered for a webinar in the future, please check out the chat and we have a submission here. We'd love to feature our community's use cases as it's so helpful for the other community members to see how ORCID is being used in other organizations. So I do want to thank you, Katya, for sharing with everyone how FCT has made such great use of ORCID.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions, so it must have been a very well-rounded presentation, leaving no one with outstanding questions. However, if you do have questions after the fact or after rewatching the recording, please feel free to reach out and we can always connect with Katya to get those answered for you. But I do want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially Katya for her wonderful presentation. And we hope to see everyone at a future event. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.